Right now, across the middle of the country, something is lining up that meteorologists don't like to talk about on the evening news. I'm not talking about a single storm. I'm not talking about one hot weekend. I'm talking about three separate weather systems stacking on top of each other at the same time, over the same stretch of land. You felt August before. Everyone has. The kind of heat that sits on your chest the second you step outside. But this year, something else is riding along with it, invisible on a normal forecast map, obvious the moment you know what you're looking for. Here's the part that changes everything. When a heat dome this size parks itself over the middle of the country, it doesn't just make things hot, it changes the air itself, the moisture, the pressure, the way storms are born. And when that collides with the leftover push of tropical moisture drifting up from the Gulf, you don't get a heat wave, you get a setup. Engineers call it a compound event. I call it two dangerous systems shaking hands. I'm not telling you a catastrophe is guaranteed. I'm telling you the ingredients are coming together, and almost nobody watching the weather app on their phone understands why that matters. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to understand something most Americans never learn until it's already happening to them. This is the story of the atmosphere over the central United States and the rare alignment that could put tens of millions of people in the path of extreme heat, sudden severe storms, and in the worst pockets, flash flooding all inside the same week. Let's start with exactly what happened, because the small details here matter a lot more than you might think. Meteorologists have a name for the giant dome of high pressure that builds over land in the middle of summer. They call it a heat dome. Picture a lid on a pot. Warm air rises, gets trapped by high pressure above it, and sinks back down, compressing and heating even further as it falls. That sinking air also pushes clouds away, which means more sunshine hits the ground, which heats the air even more. It's a feedback loop. The dome feeds itself. Heat domes aren't rare. We get them most summers. What's rare is what happens when a heat dome this size doesn't sit still, when it starts to wobble at the edges, and the jet stream, the river of fast-moving air thousands of feet above our heads, gets pushed north and buckles into a shape scientists call an omega block, because on a weather map, it genuinely looks like the Greek letter omega. Once that block forms, the entire pattern can get stuck, not for a day, for a week, sometimes longer, and while that is happening in one part of the country, something completely different is building in another. Down along the Gulf Coast, the ocean is doing what it does every August, pumping enormous amounts of warm, moist air north. Normally, a lot of that moisture gets steered out to sea, or it rains itself out along the coast before it ever reaches the interior. But when a heat dome is sitting to the north, it can act almost like a wall, funneling that moisture up the western edge of the dome instead of letting it dissipate. That moist air runs headfirst into the boundary of extremely hot, dry air, and boundaries like that are where storms are born. So you would think the story ends there, hot in the middle, stormy on the edge, simple enough. But there's a third piece, and it's the one that turns a normal August pattern into something meteorologists start flagging as a compound extreme event. To answer why, we have to leave the surface completely and look at what's happening miles above our heads. There's also a bigger historical pattern worth understanding here. In August of 1980, a heat dome over Texas and the southern plains helped fuel one of the deadliest heat events in modern American history. More than 1,000 people died, most of them quietly in their homes, without a single tornado siren or flash flood warning to mark the danger. No dramatic footage, no collapsed buildings, just heat, day after day, wearing down the body's ability to cope. That's the part almost nobody is paying attention to when they hear the word heat wave. The most dangerous weather event in America most years isn't the hurricane, it's the silence of a heat dome that simply will not move. Here's another way to think about it. A single afternoon of extreme heat is like a firecracker, sudden, sharp, over quickly. A heat dome that locks in place for 6 or 7 days straight is like driving a truck full of explosives very, very slowly down a residential street. Nothing about it looks dramatic in any single moment. The danger is entirely in how long it lasts. Now overlay the second piece guarding the moisture pushing up along the western edge of that dome. When the atmosphere holds that much extra water vapor, it isn't just humidity that makes the heat feel worse. It's fuel. And when the omega block finally starts to break down, because these patterns always break eventually, that fuel doesn't release gently. It releases all at once in the form of a severe storm outbreak, damaging straight-line winds, large hail, and in the right setup, tornadoes all erupting along the collapsing edge of the heat dome in a matter of hours. I need to pause here and be completely honest with you, because this is where a lot of channels lose the plot. I'm not telling you that a specific city is guaranteed to see a tornado. I'm not telling you exactly which day this breaks. Anyone telling you they can predict the precise location and timing of a severe weather outbreak 6 or 7 days out is not being honest with you. What meteorologists can tell you with real confidence is that when you stack a strong heat dome, a moisture-rich boundary, and an omega block pattern that has to eventually collapse, You have built the exact ingredients that have produced some of the most damaging compound weather events in U.S. history. The real story, not the fake panic, is about understanding the setup, not predicting the exact impact. This kind of pattern has a track record, and it isn't a good one. In August of 2020, a very similar setup, a stubborn heat dome parked over the northern plains, moisture pooling along its southern edge, helped fuel what's now called the derecho, a line of thunderstorms that raced across Iowa with wind gusts over 100 miles per hour, flattening more corn in a single afternoon than most droughts destroy in an entire season, and causing more insured damage than many hurricanes. There was no name for it in advance, no category, no days of warning on cable news, just a heat dome that finally cracked and 40 million people learning what derecho meant in real time. Here's the part that gives me chills. The people in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who lived through that derecho described the sky doing something they'd never seen. Not a rotating funnel, but a wall. A straight edge of wind moving across the horizon like a curtain being pulled shut. No siren gave them more than a few minutes. No rumble built up slowly. No cracks in the wall to warn them something was coming. Just clear skies, and then, in the span of an hour, roofs peeled off entire neighborhoods. That's the danger of a compound set up like this one. It doesn't announce itself the way a hurricane does, with days of spaghetti models and cone of uncertainty graphics. It builds quietly, under a heat dome that most people just experience as a really hot week, and then it resolves violently, often with far less lead time than the systems we're trained to fear. So let's bring this back to right now, and to you. If you live anywhere from the Central Plains through the Midwest and into the Ohio Valley, this is the corridor forecasters watch most closely when an omega block like this sets up, because it's the natural collision zone between the hot, dry air trapped under the dome and the moist air being funneled up its edge. That's not a small stretch of land. That corridor touches cities like Omaha, Kansas City, Des Moines, St. Louis, Indianapolis, and Columbus, a stretch of the country that's home to well over 20 million people, before you even count the farmland in between that feeds a huge share of the nation's corn and soybeans. For the people directly under the heat dome, the danger is the one nobody photographs. It's the elderly person living alone without air conditioning, whose body simply can't keep up after the fourth or fifth consecutive day above 100 degrees. It's outdoor workers, athletes at late summer practices, people whose homes were built for a climate that no longer quite matches the one they're living in. Heat like this doesn't need a warning siren to be lethal. It needs time, and stubborn high pressure gives it plenty. For the people along the collision zone, the danger flips completely. Instead of a slow grind, it's a short, violent window, the kind of severe thunderstorm complex that can go from a clear sky to golf ball hail and 80-mile-per-hour winds in under 30 minutes. If the boundary sets up over saturated ground from days of humidity and isolated storms beforehand, that same system can dump several inches of rain in a couple of hours, turning quiet creeks into flash floods before most people even get a phone alert. I'm not saying evacuate, I'm not saying panic. What I am saying is this. This is exactly the kind of pattern where being one step ahead makes all the difference, because the warning window for the storm side of this setup can be measured in minutes, not days. So here's what actually helps, and none of it requires a bunker or a stockpile. First, if you're in the corridor I described, know your county's severe weather alert system before the pattern breaks, not during it. Most areas have a free app that pushes tornado and severe thunderstorm warnings straight to your phone, faster than any siren. Second, if you or someone you love is elderly, living alone, or without reliable air conditioning, this is the week to check on them daily, not weekly. Heat deaths climb fastest on day 4, 5, and 6 of a heat dome, not day 1. Third, keep a battery-powered radio or a fully charged power bank in the house. When a derecho-style event knocks out power, it can stay out for days, and cell towers don't always hold up either. And fourth, if you're in a flood-prone area, take 10 minutes this week to actually know your evacuation route on high ground, not after the water's already rising. None of this is about fear, it's about respect. Respect for a pattern that has historically been far more dangerous than the headlines it gets. If you made it all the way here, you already understand this setup better than most people ever will. Better, honestly, than a lot of what gets reported on it. You know that the real threat isn't one storm or one hot day, it's the alignment. The heat dome that won't move, the moisture that keeps feeding it, and the block in the jet stream that decides exactly when and how violently it all lets go. Before you go, if channels like this one matter to you, the ones that explain the real science instead of just chasing headlines, hit that subscribe button, because the next part of this pattern, the part where it actually breaks, is the part meteorologists are already watching the closest. If you're anywhere in the corridor we talked about today, drop your city in the comments. I read every single one. And I want to know how this pattern is actually playing out where you live, not just what the models say from 3,000 miles away. And if this kind of setup is new to you, one question before you leave: when the sky looks calm but the forecast says otherwise, Do you trust the quiet or do you trust the pattern? Let me know down below. Stay safe out there. I'll see you in the next one.